Trudeau said that his wife, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, returned from an event in the UK feeling mild flu-like symptoms. He says she's feeling better today, but the couple is waiting for coronavirus test results. The Prime Minister says he will be working from home and added that while the First Minister's meeting has been postponed, he will be speaking with premiers and Indigenous leaders over the phone to discuss strategies on how to keep Canadians safe. And late this afternoon, Ontario announced all publicly funded schools will be closed for 2 weeks after March break, meaning students will not return until April the 6th. This is power play. Let's get to the players. So what does all this mean for Canadians? Let's bring in Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland in studio for some answers. And thanks for being here on a very busy day.
Great to be with you, Beverly.
And good to be with you to ask you specifically, I mean, the Prime Minister of this country in isolation, as is his wife who's awaiting the coronavirus test results. So yes, we hear abundance of caution, but it also sends shockwaves, to Canadians that the Prime Minister is in isolation. What can you tell us about that?
Well, first of all, let me say how I would describe it is the Prime Minister is working from home. Mm-hmm. And he has been working really hard. Today, he's already had 3 phone calls, at least 3, with G7 leaders. He participated in our ad hoc cabinet committee on the coronavirus, which I chair. The PM was with us on the phone. So he is very actively engaged, working very hard. In terms of the message it sends, I think it sends exactly the right message to Canadians, which is the way that we take care of ourselves and also the way we behave as a good Canadian should and take care of our family and friends and neighbors and coworkers is if we are unwell or if someone like a spouse or a family member with whom you live is unwell, then it's a good idea to stay home.
So and in terms of the work that is being done that he can do from his home, you mentioned the G7 leader conversations. There's so much to talk about, obviously with coronavirus, different strategies in place, but also because of the ban that Trump imposed on travel from Europe that he announced last night that Canada wasn't informed about prior to that announcement. Was there a discussion at his end that you know about or from your end?
For sure. And Canada wasn't informed yesterday, neither was the European Union. This was an action that I think the Americans felt they needed to take very quickly, and they took unilaterally. But as you know, Beverly, we have the world's longest unmilitarized border with the United States. It's tremendously important for both of our countries. 400,000 people cross that border every day. And so today, our government has very energetically been reaching out to the United States to talk with them about that border, starting with the Prime Minister, who did today speak with President Trump. And they talked about coronavirus. The Prime Minister talked about the strong Canadian public health response to coronavirus, and they talked about the border. And they really reaffirmed in that conversation the strength of the Canada-U.S. partnership. They talked about the new NAFTA, and the President spoke about how he really sees that as cementing the strong ties between our countries. And that is only one of the many conversations we've had with the U.S. today. I spoke earlier today with Secretary Mike Pompeo. We also talked about our shared border and our strong relationship. Bill Blair, the Minister for Public Security, spoke with his counterpart, the Secretary for Homeland Security, and Vince Rigby, our National Security Advisor, spoke to his U.S. counterpart. So I really have to say the fact that the Americans have made themselves so available to us today and been so open to talking, to me, is a very good sign of the strength of that partnership, of the strength of the communication.
Sure, the communication is key in all of these events that are going on right now, and probably part of that conversation with Trump might have been, like, we need to know, let us know in advance if things are going to go on like that. So these conversations are continuing with that. Let me ask you about, we've got a number of different public figures who are in self-isolation, the leader of the NDP, we've got the Minister of Natural Resources, and others. And let me ask you about when people see that and they think, Parliament and everybody working together and question period went on, even though the First Minister's meeting was postponed. Is it a higher risk situation when you've got parliamentarians who, for a living, run around and shake people's hands, maybe not these days, but they came off a break week, they're in their constituencies, and then they're going into rooms, that could be crowded at times. Is it time to think about a discussion of, gee, should we suspend or adjourn?
Well, That is an issue for the leadership of the House, for the leadership of Parliament. I think that people in all of Canada's workplaces right now, all of Canada's schools, need to be thinking about what are the appropriate steps we can take to introduce some social distancing. The public health advice right now is social distancing is the best way to protect ourselves, to protect our communities from the spread of coronavirus. We're seeing a number of provinces take some decisions about extending March break, which I know my son, who is 10, is delighted about.
Yeah, right.
I perhaps a little bit, all parents, I think we're going to need to figure out how to manage it. But I think we all appreciate that now is a time to be taking social distancing measures in all the places where Canadians gather. And I think that is what is happening across our country in a very mature, thoughtful, dare I say it, Canadian way.
Yeah, and I guess given the business that you're in and what you do, is that possible to do with the public events and the demands on your time? We've seen a number of the folks that are running for leadership of the Conservative Party, a number of them cancelling all events because they don't want to be in that situation. Can you do that?
Look, I think that we all need to do it. I think that we all need to find a balance between doing our jobs and introducing appropriate social distancing measures to our society, to our public life. And look, I think a lot of us already know how to work from home. And I think as a country, we're going to need to get better at doing that right now. The one other thing I would say, Beverly, is at the end of the day, of course, the life of the country needs to go on, but nothing can be more important. Nothing can be a greater priority than the health and safety of Canadians. And I think we all get that. That is certainly our government's perspective on this. And I think, we are seeing across the country governments, our government really understands the importance, the role of federal leadership, but we are seeing governments, communities at all levels understand that and act appropriately. And I have to say, I am really proud of the Canadian response, which is people are taking real action in a calm, sensible way and are understanding that it's in all of our own hands to come together as a country to take care of ourselves and each other. Social distancing is a really important part of that. So are really basic things like washing our hands. Yeah. I washed my hands when I walked into this building twice, actually.
Yeah, okay. Well, fair enough. But I mean, when you talk about in the calm approach that, in terms of Canadians, but there's a great deal of concern when it's a ramped up situation of events closing down, of the NBA, the NHL, big concert series, skating championships. And so again, I come back to, at what point would there be a threshold where it would be most appropriate, even to lead by example, up to maybe shut down or adjourn Parliament for now?
So let me start, Beverly, with the beginning of your question of people becoming anxious because events are being shut down. I would actually encourage people to look at it exactly in the opposite way. And I think we should be encouraged by the fact that we're seeing a lot of people, businesses, entertainment events, schools, taking the mature decision and taking the decision to bring some social distancing in our lives. So it should not be a cause for anxiety. Rather, it should be something that people look at and see and say, actually, we are behaving well and intelligently as a country. And I don't want to minimize at all the situation. I think it's important for people to understand that the advice we're getting from experts is this is a serious situation and it is likely to get worse before it gets better. All of our efforts need to be about flattening the curve. When it comes to Parliament, I think that is a really good question. And I think that there are, that needs to be a conversation that happens between all parties. It needs to be a decision we take really as a united House of Commons. And I do think that good, responsible conversations around issues like that are going on.
And what about for the people that keep looking, even though they don't want to, at the markets these days? Another brutal day on the markets in terms of making people feel uncomfortable, whether it's one thing or even if they can find some calmness on the coronavirus front with repeated that it's low, we're losing money hand over fist watching these markets because of all of these events, not the least of which was the ban that Trump put in place last night.
Look, this is a serious situation, and I do not want in any way to minimize it. The situation with the coronavirus is serious, and it's important for Canadians to understand that the government gets that we are on it, that we understand when it comes to the health and safety of Canadians, federal leadership is absolutely necessary, and it is there. We had a meeting today of the special ad hoc cabinet committee that I chair on the coronavirus. We start every day with an early morning call of that whole committee. When it comes to the economy, I think that is a really good question, and you are quite right. We are now beginning to see significant consequences in the global economy and increasingly in the Canadian economy as a result of the coronavirus. And what I want to say there is our government came out this week with a $1 billion coronavirus response package that was about health and safety measures. It was also about measures to support our economy, to ensure that Canadian workers who need to go into self-isolation or be quarantined still can get support, and to provide some support for Canadian business. Having said that, we see that this is a fast-moving, fast-developing situation. The response this week is an important step, but we are watching the situation very, very closely. And what I do want to say to you, Beverly, and all of your viewers, is the government absolutely understands that this is a serious situation for the economy as well. Canada is in a strong position to respond. We have a AAA credit rating.
Yeah.
We have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and our government has not only the fiscal firepower, but also the will to respond strongly.
That firepower,
and we will.
That firepower could include stimulus, could include more, help in the budget if this situation continues to worsen and if the markets continue to fall.
We will do whatever it takes.
Okay.
We will be there.
And just before we leave, we all hope that the Prime Minister is doing just fine. We hear he's healthy at the moment.
I spoke to him several times today.
Okay.
His voice was very robust.
Okay.
He sounded energetic as usual.
And did he say, "Are you ready? If not," because that would be you.
He sounded fantastic. He is very much in charge. He has been doing great things for the country today, and he's going to keep on doing them tomorrow.
And you're well.
I'm feeling great also.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind sleeping a little more.
Yeah, I guess. All right. I really appreciate you coming in. I know it's been just a crazy day, so thank you very much.
Great to be with you.
You too.